Hi, talking tonight with Dr. Eli Karam, who's an assistant professor at the University of Louisville's Kent School of Social Work. And coming up, by the way, is Amy Gottschalk, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of neat things our second hour, and dealing particularly in working with adolescents. So I'm sure we'll hear lots of good things. That, by the way, will be sponsored by our Kentucky Psychological Association that we're all very proud of. All right. Dr. Karam, who is president-elect of the Kentucky Association of Marriage Family Therapists. I'm telling you, all our professional associations tonight are represented.
We get along with KPA great, though. They're co-sponsoring a conference for us coming up, so those are good people.
Good folks. All right. We're talking about adolescence. Now, a lot of times we talk about the fact that adolescents will act out. And what about parent? We're talking about children in divorce, really, and when that happens, what's the best way for parents to talk to their children about their other parent they've divorced from?
Well, you always want to take the high road when possible. You don't want any of that, as we said, that baggage or anything that they shouldn't know to come out. And the best thing I tell these divorcing families and couples when I work with them, you want to maintain your respect for your co-parent. Because if you view them, you might not view them as a good spouse or someone you can rely on that way anymore. But if you see them with your child or children and they do a good job, and you can say, well, I might not love her anymore, but at least she's a wonderful mother. And if you have respect on that level, that which needs to come through, and that's what you need in order to be able to cooperate with that co-parent. So you want to take the high road. You want to, if you can't say anything nice, as we say, don't say anything at all, but you want to focus on, you want your child to have a connection with that opposite parent. You want them to develop old rituals. I was working with the family, and father and son, they love baseball together, so they still do that. And his ex, the teenage moms, encourages the teenager to go and develop new rituals with his father, even though she doesn't want to be a part of those anymore. So to promote that relationship, even if it's not together as a family anymore, that you're still doing things with your children and doing some new things as well.
And then in developing new customs.
Yeah, rituals.
You're going to approach, for example, celebrating the holidays, for example.
Right.
There'll be new customs. It used to be on the holidays, Christmas Eve, we all did this or that.
Right.
Well, it's going to be different now with mom gone or dad gone.
That's another one of those things you asked earlier about what kids want to know. Where am I going to spend my holidays? What are we doing with my birthday? Things like that. They want to know that. And again, if you have a good co-parental plan, those are all things that should be explicit and able to deal with. And then maybe we should say a little bit about that. So in Jefferson County, our colleague at the University of Louisville is also professor emeritus now, Joe Brown, with the courts, helped develop a program called Families in Transition, or FIT. And that's something that families and children and teenagers all go through when they're getting a divorce. But sometimes programs like that, while great, they're not enough. So it's very common for me in my practice to work with divorcing families on co-parental plans, either with the divorcing parents or the whole family together. And the better the plan is, the more transparent and explicit it is, generally people know what to expect. And when you have similar expectations versus different expectations, things just flow better. So I see quite a few divorcing families now, and people think, well, I couldn't save the relationship, so why go to therapy or why go to counseling? But I'm here to say, you know what? You can do some really good work if you know the relationship is not going to work, but how you leave it the right way for your children, working in the best interest of your kids, that's really important. So I would advocate, if you've never thought about therapy, it's not too late, or counseling, it's not too late to go, and this transition point at the end of a marriage is a good point to go.
Sometimes parents will pump their children for information about the ex-spouse.
Oh, yeah. You can't do that. I mean, if you got a question, first of all, I always say, depending on that type of relationship, even these cooperative colleagues, it's like, once the relationship ends, you really have to have a firm boundary. You can't be wanting to know about these details of your ex's life unless it revolves around your children. And if it revolves around how they take care of your children, where your children are going to be, then you have access to it. So I coach couples on how to talk about the children and how to do that conversation. Some couples send emails. Some couples meet weekly or monthly, go to have coffee around the children, a co-parental meeting, which they get some structure from and a model for when they go to therapy. Some couples are very easy. Something goes on with the kid, they pick up the phone, they talk to them, they work very well around them. But those fiery foes and those angry associates don't do it as well. And every phone call to talk about the kid, it might start out with the kid, Dr. Stan, as you know, and then it turns into, well, you did this, or what's going on with this, and it turns into the same fight they had during the marriage, and the child is in the room on the other end and gets triangulated and dragged into it, and that's not a good thing. So you want to focus on the children, and you don't want to pump your children for information about your ex. Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. And then, of course, some parents, you get in this situation, particularly fathers, I don't want to just pick on dads tonight, but when that dad only gets to see their child for one weekend every 2 weeks, there's a temptation to be a Disneyland dad. By that, they want everything to be terrific. They want it to be fun, because I only get to see my child every 2 weeks, for goodness sakes.
Right.
And then they don't set the boundaries like mom might have to set them, because she's got to make sure they get to bed early every day, and so they can get up and go to school every morning, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Mom's like, well, why do I have to be bad cop all the time? And, you get to go and take them and have all this fun with them, and I have to be the one enforcing the rules and the structure. And you can understand how both co-parents in there could have understandable parts. Dad, as you said, doesn't get to see him that much, so he wants to maximize his time. But mom is building resentment because she has to do all the hard work and the dirty work while dad is out being the Disneyland dad. So those parents need to get on the same page. And I always say, when you can have the same set of rules and expectation at both homes, mom's home and dad's homes, that's the way to go. If you can have a cooperative relationship with your co-parent, that's what you want to do. But if not, if your ex is intent on doing it their way and their style is not a mesh with yours, then you must be consistent, and you must let your children know the difference between being at their father's house and your house. And you have to be consistent in those expectations and rules and not waver on them based on what your ex is doing or not doing.
And that's the often heard kind of thing we hear from children, and we hear it both from the young children as well as adolescents. Well, mom says I can do this, or dad says, and then they get playing them against each other. And of course, since there may be some bitterness, depending at what stage the parents are at with each other, that they don't want to be the bad guy or the bad girl.
Yeah, children are hardwired to, if there's a little wedge or a split to exploit between the parents, they will. And you can understand how it would even be easier to do that with divorcing parents, where the front is sometimes not unified as it is. So to play one parent against the other for the child, or sometimes teenager's own advantage, it happens a lot. So that's why you have to have a good co-parental plan. You have to be on the same page of what you allow, what you won't allow.
Sometimes when there's bitterness, parents just look for problems. For example, dad's supposed to pick up the children at such and such time, and he's 30 minutes late.
Oh yeah, and that will start a whole cascade of problems. So they're waiting to catch their ex-spouse in a violation of the rules or the court decree or whatever, versus these cooperative colleagues. They understand things happen, things come up, and they're not going to let that ruin the plan, And one being 30 minutes late once is different than a pattern of every week being, later and later and later. So to be, again, on the same page, having expectations, and to be able to talk about how we're going to do this with our children with a third party sometimes can be helpful, because a lot of times these parents get gridlocked in their old problems, and even though they're not married anymore, they're having that same fight they did while they were married. So to have some skills to how to talk about it different, how to advocate in the best interest of the children is very important.
All right, well, our lines are open. We welcome your calls, talking with Dr. Eli Karam. 571-2428. By the way, Dr. Karam has a webpage, www.elikaram, ELIKARAM, www.elikaram.com. I'm psychologist Dr. Stan Frager. We welcome your calls and comments, thoughts, and experience in these issues as well. One thing about our Sunday nights is we also can help each other, so I enjoy hearing from you. 571-2428. Stan Frager, and we're talking about co-parenting after divorce, some ideas about what you might want to do, not do, and you better have some of these resolved before you officially break, because it's kind of hard afterwards. We'll talk about that when we get back.
To speak to life coach Dr. Stan Freger, call now, 571-2428. That's 571-2428.